All right, welcome to your shift, everyone. Today we're doing a hands-on explainer of modern SOC operations. We're not just going to sit here reviewing textbook theory. We are fundamentally shifting how you work. We're moving far, far away from that traditional reactive daily grind of just closing tickets, and we're going to start seeing the much bigger picture. Okay, let's dive into this with a scenario. Picture this. You've just logged in for the day, grabbed your coffee, and bam, you have 500 alerts sitting right there in your queue. So how do you find the single one that actually matters? Because look, if you treat them all equally and just start working your way down from the top, you are already way behind the adversary. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the visual shift from event-driven to case-based investigation. You see, attackers don't just act to trigger a single alert. They don't break into a network just to set off an alarm and run away. They leave a connected, chronological trail of breadcrumbs as they move through your environment. Let's really contrast these two worlds for a second. In an alert-centric SOC, you are dealing with crazy high noise, just constantly swatting down individual false positives. It is incredibly frustrating, right? You close a seemingly isolated VPN login alert, and then maybe 3 hours later, you close a totally separate PowerShell script alert, never once realizing they're related. But in a case-centric SOC, you track connected entities. Suddenly, that VPN login and that PowerShell script are inextricably linked, and they reveal this terrifying story of a compromised account actively exfiltrating your data. To cut through all that immense noise, you need what we call an anchor event. This is absolutely crucial. An anchor event is a key event that's highly suspicious even in complete isolation. It's the definitive starting point, the thread you pull to expand your investigation outward. Think of a web server suddenly executing a bash shell or a late-night VPN login by a core domain administrator. That right there is your anchor. So how do we actually do this? We follow a realistic workflow. First up, we triage the alerts. 2, we identify that anchor event. 3, we track the specific entities involved. 4, we reconstruct the timeline. And 5, we make a containment decision. And throughout this entire process, you've got to use the cyber kill chain and MITRE attack as active lenses. Seriously, don't just treat them as abstract theory. Use them right there in the moment to predict exactly what the attacker's next move is going to be. Let's get our hands dirty with our first exercise and see how this builds in a real scenario. Take a look at these raw logs. We've got a successful VPN login coming from Russia. Following that, an Active Directory logon. Next, the EDR shows Microsoft Word launching PowerShell. After that, a DNS query goes out to a rare domain. And finally, we see massive access to a local file server. I want you to put yourself right on the SOC floor right now. You're looking at those logs. Is this signal or is it just noise? And more importantly, what is the anchor event here? What would you actually do in this exact situation if this popped up on your dashboard? Let's just pause and reflect on that for a second. Look really closely at the EDR process relationship. Think about normal, everyday user behavior. Microsoft Word should absolutely not be spawning PowerShell, right? That right there is your anchor event. It literally screams document-based phishing. And this brilliantly illustrates how chronological order reveals the complete attack story. Just look at the timeline we've built. At 03:12, the attacker gains initial access via a compromised VPN login. By 03:18, they achieve execution when Word spawns PowerShell. A minute later at 03:19, they establish command and control with a rare domain DNS query. And at 03:42, they hit the collection phase by accessing the file server. See, you aren't just looking at isolated alerts anymore, you're reading a complete start-to-finish phishing-to-collection attack story. Okay, let's try another one. Here we have a suspected web server breach. We see a simple external GET request for a profile page, followed up by another request attempting to inject an OS command. Then, EDR catches Tomcat executing cmd.exe. And finally, a network log shows the web server opening a brand new internal database connection on port 1433. Ask yourself, is this just a simple, isolated web attack that maybe our WAF should have blocked? Or is this the start of lateral movement deep into our core network? Try to think like the attacker for a moment. If this is real, what happens next? Think about this logically. Why on earth is an external-facing web server suddenly opening an internal database connection? Web attacks rarely just end at the web layer, guys. They are stepping stones to get to your most valuable data. So the crucial point is this. The anchor event is Tomcat executing cmd.exe. The attack escalated incredibly quickly from a public application exploit straight to deep internal database access. Because of this, your immediate response absolutely requires host isolation for that web server and instantly revoking those database access accounts. You gotta act fast here. Now, let's pivot over to the cloud. Here's our third exercise. Take a look at these CloudTrail logs. We see a create access key action coming from a rare region, then a listing of buckets, followed by retrieving nearly 2,000 objects. Finally, spinning up GPU instances and an identity provider logging an impossible travel alert. Notice what's totally missing here. There is no malware. There's no malicious executable for you to quarantine. So, is host isolation even relevant in this case? How do you contain an attack that exists purely in the cloud via API calls? And what is your anchor event? Consider this environment very carefully. In the cloud, traditional endpoints just aren't the primary target. Accounts, permissions, and API keys, that is the true battleground. If you're just looking for malware, you are going to miss the breach entirely. Here are your cloud abuse takeaways. Your anchor is the creation of that new access key from an unusual geographic region. A sudden spike in data downloads with a newly generated key is a massive critical case. The attack flow moved straight from credential access to data collection. Your response here cannot rely on an antivirus scan. You must focus entirely on revoking those keys, invalidating active sessions, and restricting IAM permissions immediately. All right, moving on to filtering the noise, specifically dealing with false positives. Of course, in the daily reality of the SOC, not everything is a nation-state attack. We have to be able to separate the subtle differences between benign, everyday behavior and real threats. We have to filter out the noise. Let's look at some common false positives so you can quickly spot them. Security scanners, for instance, will hit multiple ports and look exactly like attacker reconnaissance. Backup or batch jobs will trigger massive nighttime file access, which completely mimics data exfiltration. CDN or SaaS traffic will often show repeated communication with rare domains. And hey, your own IT team will use admin scripts via PowerShell that look exactly like an attacker's execution phase. This brings us to a really critical operational question that you are going to face every single shift. When do you step in and block immediately, and when do you just monitor silently to accumulate more data for a case? Here is the reasoning you need to apply. You enforce an immediate block for things like ransomware execution, clear data exfiltration, or a confirmed administrator compromise. Waiting around in those scenarios is fatal. But if you see a single login anomaly, an isolated PowerShell session, or a recurring scanner, you accumulate the case. Blocking too early without enough context is just going to disrupt the business, but waiting too long on a compromised admin account is an absolute disaster. Now, shifting this mindset manually is incredibly difficult given the sheer volume of data in a modern environment. That is exactly why technology like Stellar Cyber's Open XDR is so vital for us. It detects alerts based directly on cyber kill chain and MITRE attack intelligence, and then it automatically correlates them with your existing third-party alerts into a single unified case. The key value here is profound. It's a real game changer. Unlike traditional solutions that just leave you drowning in disconnected logs, this enables automatic case-level investigation and response. You are no longer manually analyzing individual alerts. You are understanding and responding to attacks automatically. At the case level through advanced correlation, it fundamentally completes the shift in mindset we've trained for today. So as you head out onto the floor for your shift today, I want to leave you with one final provocative question. When you look at your dashboard, are you just closing alerts to meet a quota? Or are you actually stopping the attacker's story? Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and stay sharp out there.